everyone. I hope that you had a very good day. I want to thank you for joining us for this very important discussion about Black mental health during Mental Health Month. This is Mental Health Month. May is Mental Health Month. We'll have a panel discussion and then an opportunity to discuss the topic and ask questions. And we really welcome your questions tonight. This is an interactive session. This is the second of our series for Black mental health. We began last week with an overall discussion of mental health and the stigma around it, and encouraging people, especially in this day of trauma and emotional stress and COVID and uncertainty and just the hustles and bustles of life, to seek out ways in which you can de-stress, you can relax a little bit, you can realize if you're and acknowledge that you're having some challenges, either temporary emotional challenges, long-term challenges. There's no negative stigma in seeking mental help. I've sought professional mental health in the past, and I found it to be really rewarding and very important to me. And let me tell you, after you get someone to give you some additional outside kind of disattached from emotion advice, it's so helpful and it's so rewarding and encouraging. So I want to encourage that. My name is Keith Carson, and I'm a member of the Alameda County Board of Supervisors representing District 5. And even though the county has 14 cities, 1,600,000 people that live in Alameda County, and there are 5 of us on the Board of Supervisors serving you in the area of healthcare, mental health, public health, which includes environmental health, as well as social services and public safety. This is a county that's supposed to serve you and provide you everyone the necessities in life, the things that they need. So that's a part of what we, the 5 board members in Alameda County, do, or actually commissioners of board members across this country in over 3,000 counties have the responsibility for the health, the safety, and the welfare of the people who live here. Since 1949, we began celebrating in May Mental Health Month, and counties are basically the safety net providers and providing mental health to the residents who are there, not just the severely mental ill. We do that and provide those services. Some of you know of John George. Many of you might know about a number of the other safety net programs that we provide in school, out of school, for young people, for adults, for seniors. We do provide these services. Tonight is a part of our month-long series on various mental health topics that affect the African-American community. This series will be in partnership with Alameda County Behavioral Care and our community partners. Matter of fact, when we started our general mental health series kickoff, the head of our mental health services for Alameda County, Dr. Tribble, kicked off a mental health month for us in a big way, and we really appreciate that. Tonight, I'm going to ask that Shahida introduce our moderator for tonight, who will introduce the panelists. And again, I want to say thank you for everybody who registered and are tuning in, and encourage other people to tune. There's no fear in asking questions. There are no dumb questions. Only dumb questions are the ones you don't ask, which you really want answers for. Don't say whatever is on your mind regarding trauma, emotional stress, mental health. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shahida and our staff who organized all of these series and got our panelists together. And I want to say a big thank you to our panelists for supporting the community and imparting some of your information and knowledge. And we're going to make sure that through our office, for people who want to do follow-up, find out how you can follow up after these series are over, contact different organizations and individuals, you'll have a chance to do that. I do know that tonight is a real focus on youth. And that's a very important one, because a lot of time our youth may be experiencing trauma, emotionalism, having thoughts and stuff, and don't know where to go, where to turn. We try to make sure that from K to 12 in our schools, we have counselors and mental health appropriated individuals to help out and make people feel trusted in terms of being able to share their thoughts and keep those thoughts and stuff between them and the counselors and the therapists. But sometimes it takes a lot. And so our families have to, our guardians have to be embracing and open-hearted and open mind to also work with children and young people and young adults to open up to issues around stress, mental health, and tensions that are going on in their lives. So with that, again, thank you very much. Shahida, thank you for organizing and everything you've done to prepare the African-American community for this whole series of mental health around mental health in the Black community. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So Rochelle, I'm gonna ask that you introduce yourself first, and then I would like for each of the panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll start with starting into the discussion. Or we'll play a video and then we'll start into the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Supervisor Carson. I'm Rochelle Collins, and I am the Program Director of Project Eden, part of Horizon Services. And our organization works with young people and young adults in regards to issues of alcohol and other drugs.
Anyone can start, take it.
Okay, I'll go.
I'm Talia Benet. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm Talia Benet. I'm the Executive Director of HHREC. Nice to see everybody's face.
Hello, good evening, and thank you, Supervisor Carson, for the invitation, and Shahida for the invitation. It's so important to be having this conversation in the Black community. My name's Teiahsha Bankhead. I am a licensed psychotherapist and a retired professor of social work, but I come to you as the Executive Director of Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth, where I guess what we're most known for in this context is hosting and holding African-American healing circles. So we hold 10 circles a week and invite Black community members from all over the city. And when we're not in a time of COVID, we're also in juvenile hall, providing space for people to kind of process their feelings and oftentimes to also process trauma. So really happy to be here.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Supervisor Carson and the Alameda County Board of Supervisors. My name is Dr. Karriem Salaam. I'm a board certified child and adolescent psychiatrist. I'm a founding member of Global Health Psychiatry, which is a company established by 10 African-American psychiatrists located throughout the country. And I'm representing the Pathways to Wellness African-American Technical Training and Assistance Program. It's a delight to be here. I'm a clinical assistant professor of psychiatry at Drexel University College of Medicine, and just an advocate and a practitioner of mental health treatments. So again, thank you so much. And this is a pivotal and critically important conversation to have in our community to address issues related to stigma as it applies to mental health and substance use disorders.
Now we'll play a quick video.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that invitation. So this is a video of a few people who have been consumers, young people, Black people who have been consumers of mental health services, to talk just a little bit about their reflections on their experiences. It's only 40 seconds. So I'm going to share my screen.
Mental health, I didn't really realize that that's what it was. We didn't talk about mental health growing up.
Just like being a Black man in general, right? It's like you aren't really able to be vulnerable.
Living in poor Black communities, there was just not the language or the information given to us.
When I came out as gay, that caused a lot of tension between my dad and me.
Like I couldn't imagine like being in a space where you are vulnerable, and then not having someone there to talk to.
That's it. I thought that might help frame the discussion or just give us a little flavor of some of the direct lived experiences of folks in our community.
Yes, that's great. So Rochelle, if you want to take it away and start asking questions of the panel, and then for the audience, we will be moderating questions in the Q&A box. And if you have any questions as time goes on, you can raise your hand and we'll be calling on you live later on in the discussion.
Okay, great. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do like a round robin, but I'm going to switch between screens so that I can look at the questions that I'll be presenting to each of you. So I will initially start with Dr. Salaam, and the question is, what is mental health?
Excellent question, and it's always good to open a conversation with definitions. So there's no standardized definition for mental health, but when you think of it in terms of ideas, it's a wide-ranging, really set of problems that affect thinking, emotions, and behavior. And so that's more like mental illness. And when in the absence of that, the converse of that is mental health. Additionally, with mental health, mental health is not about being at your baseline, it's about thriving and succeeding and really living a full life. And when you think of the mind and the brain, which are two different things, that's like the command center of really many of the functions of one's life. And so when that is threatened or jeopardized or functioning not at its best level, it can impact just multiple aspects of someone's life. And with mental illness, one of the central features is functional impairment. And so your ability to navigate relationships and have relationships with other people, your ability to practice your vocation or support yourself, or if you're a student, complete your tasks as they apply to school, and just fulfill your obligations. So when you are not mentally healthy, your ability to function in these spheres is impaired.
Great, thank you. And I'll move on to Mrs. Bennett. Same question.
Thank you. For me, with the TAE that we work with at HHREC, servicing the community since 1984. And so our downtown TAE program, this is something that we are dealing with on a day-to-day basis with our TAE. And so what is mental health? What does it look like for us, and even for myself and family members? It looks like depression. It looks like anxiety. PTSD is a big one that we see with our young people that we service. Just them coming in and losing friends to gun violence, for example, to drug use. And so that's really what it's representing when we are working with our TAE. And even myself, staff have experienced, whether you're talking about depression or anxiety. And I know a lot of parents that we work with, their children, especially in this COVID environment, it's kind of heightening right now. And so that's what it means. That's what it represents. And I see it on a day-to-day with our TAE as a barrier where we all have to wrap our arms around our young people to help them overcome and point them to resources for, they're dealing with depression, or if they're dealing with anxiety, or if they're dealing with PTSD. And so, so that's my answer. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Mrs. Bankhead, same question. you're on mute.
Yes, that's been said so many times in the last year.
No problem.
So I agree with what's been said. What I want to say to kind of like add to that conversation about mental illness is this idea about mental wellness, right? That is in the same ways that we are as a society, not in complete agreement with exactly our definitions around mental illness. There's even less agreement around what mental wellness is and how to achieve it. And in our communities, in Black communities, we often have been struggling just to survive. So the idea of thriving in a healthy environment that promotes mental wellness is seen as an indulgence often, and not seen as something that's achievable or attainable for us. Or we only recognize mental illness when it has gotten to a level of really severe, chronic, and debilitating functional impairment. And so I guess I like to always talk about this other side of kind of mental illness, mental wellness, and think about our mental health along this continuum, similar to the ways that we think about our physical health. It's important to know that we are all on the continuum of, having mental wellness and mental illness, just like we're all on the continuum of having physical health and physical illness. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Now we'll move on to the next question. What are the ways that youth and young adults exhibit mental illness that is different than older adults? And I'll start with Mrs. Benet.
Unmute myself there. For me, the difference is, for the most part, what I've seen is a lot of combativeness. And an example of that is we can be working with a young person on their resume and there's like, I don't want to do it. Or we know they need a job. We're helping them get a job interview, and they just start lying. They don't want to go, or I don't want to do it. They become very combative, or just lying, and you kind of like, well, there's no reason for you to be lying. What's really behind all of this? And so the acting out, in the sense of being combative, of not wanting to take receive help when help is trying to be given, and lying, and maybe that looks like they're lying about okay, why are you coming in here this morning? Why are you so irritable? Oh, because I'm just having a bad day. But maybe they didn't eat that morning because there's no food in the house, and so but not coming out and just saying that. So it comes out when we work with Tay. What I normally see is it comes out in a way of combativeness, lying, or even manipulation at sometimes. So those are kind of like the differences, at least that I've observed, versus with working with some of our adults, because HHREC is an intergenerational agency. And so with our adults, it might look that they're a little bit more forthcoming. They'll kind of tell you, hey, this is what's going on with me. They'll be a little bit more forthcoming, in my experience, at least. And so with youth, you have to kind of dissect through that and say, well, wait a minute, you're acting out, but something else is really behind this, and mentally you're not in a good space. So let's talk about that. So that would be the difference that I've seen.
Great, thank you. And I just want to acknowledge that I do see the questions in the question and answer, and we'll definitely get to those as we're progressing through this panel this evening. So I'm going to move over to Mrs. Bankhead.
Yeah.
Can I interrupt for a second? If I looked at the flyer accurately, I think it's Dr. Bankhead. And
it is Dr. Bankhead.
The reason why I'm pointing that out is she has special expertise. And I think that ought to be recognized, especially if folks are going to recognize me. She should be recognized as well.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Thank you.
And I know Black folks, that's really important to us. So yes, it's fine. I didn't introduce myself in that way, but yes, I'm a doctor. I'm a professor and have a PhD. So yeah, around this question of how youth exhibit mental illness, I first want to talk about how they are similar. So similarly, there are higher rates of anxiety and depression. Like, we have these high rates of anxiety and depression in the larger society. Youth have higher rates of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and sometimes schizophrenia shows up in late adolescence, and eating disorders. How it manifests itself, how some of these conditions manifest themselves are different in transitional age youth. So for example, as Talia, I think, was talking about, that oftentimes we experience from youth, I wouldn't call it combative as much as turning outward versus turning inward. So depression from some, from older people might be the ideas that popular society has about depression. You're at home, you're alone, you're isolated. You are feeling this and turning it in, and it may be hurting the body in this way in which you're not socializing and reaching out. Where younger people, transitional age youth, may be actively engaged with other people, may be engaged in aggressive ways and maybe combative ways. And so that depression, for example, can get overlooked or misdiagnosed or just not seen. And there often will be less compassion for the struggle and the pain that a young person is feeling because of the way in which they're manifesting the feeling. And so my experience in working with transitional age youth actually is that they often have deep depression, particularly Black youth, around the losses in their lives, the many, many traumas that they've experienced. And I have sat with many, many young people, Black men, young, Black boys and young men here in Oakland who, have lost their friends to gun violence and to kind of other types of trauma. And they really are contemplating retaliation, harming others, gun violence in a reaction to what is really a mental health situation of being sad and depressed and wanting to do something about it, wanting to take control and take some kind of action as a result of it. And so oftentimes the other thing I see with transitional age youth is this sense of hopelessness and helplessness and not having a place to express that vulnerability. For Black boys and men particularly, is it safe to be vulnerable, to cry or to express deep emotion, connection, or isolation or loneliness? So it's more difficult in the ways in which kind of race is socially constructed in our society for young Black boys and men to just show their full humanity. And so there's a way that if they're experiencing mental health symptoms, that it doesn't show up in many of the typical ways that professionals are used to seeing in the mainstream population.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Salaam. I knew it was Dr. Bankhead, but she did introduce herself as that, but we should definitely be proud of all of our accomplishments, which a lot of times in the African-American community, the Black community, we don't always speak up to some of the things that we're proud of, the endeavors that we went through to get to that point. So yes, thank you very much. And the same question to you.
Sure. So just to keep it simple, when you think of the difference between youth and folks who are a little more seasoned, folks who are a little more seasoned have more life experience and they have more practice with language. So when you lack the vocabulary, the emotional vocabulary, you tend to act those things out. So that's one of the hallmarks of, mental health issues in a youngster or a younger person. So for example, depression more commonly presents in children and adolescents and younger transitional age youth as anger and irritability versus sadness and the blues that appears more commonly in folks who are more seasoned or who are older. And as Dr. Bankhead mentioned, and I believe Ms. Bennett mentioned, she talked about internalizing behaviors, so feeling sad and blue and the social isolation and kind of divorcing yourself from social connection versus externalizing behaviors and, acting out. Perhaps, it may involve more physicality, so property damage and destruction. And many of these young brothers are in a lot of pain. I mean, I've seen young brothers where I just want to hug them because there's so many people who are invested in being afraid of them. And it's easier, it's lazy to look at these young men as violent and aggressive and not invest in their humanity, when many of these young brothers are hurting, and they weren't born that way. They arrived at that destination, right? That was a process in the making. So when we see these young men, we should see the young men in our family, whether it be our nephews, our sons, the kids we coach, the kids we worship with. And then that really helps foster a connection. The other thing too is many of these guys, especially, you know, I'm on the East Coast, hailing from the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection, more commonly referred to as Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. But many of these young guys have a sense of a foreshortened future. And so you might be in Oakland, they call them OGs. In Philly, they call them old heads. An old head might be in his mid-20s, right? That's not old at all, but according to that scale. So a lot of these guys, they can't envision, you know, a period of time where they live to have gray hair like me. So anyway, again, it largely has to do with the vocabulary that one has, and younger people tend to have a vocabulary that's a little more physical versus older folks who can describe what they're experiencing, especially if that's like sadness and the blues.
Great, thank you very much. And so I'm going to go off of our script of questions, and I'm actually going to go to some of the questions in the Q&A. So here's one from Nubia. Hello and thank you. Would anyone be willing to talk about the issues of police in our schools rather than mental, emotional health services, counseling, healing circles, etc.? Who would like to take that first?
I love that one. That's up my alley. Wow. Well, because, you know, my organization, Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth, has been involved in bringing healing circles into Oakland Unified School District for the last 16 years. And we were involved in helping to remove the police, right, from OUSD and to usher in into the schools culture and climate ambassadors who can do just that. So this focus on kind of emotional intelligence and on cultivating a sense of vulnerability and connection and resilience through, you know, through just authentic sharing of one's truth is what restorative justice healing circles are all about. And it's what I know of the strategic plan right now with the current superintendent, that I'm on that committee, you know, folks who are working to bring that into OUSD, and OUSD as the first in the nation to, you know, defund the police within. So I think there is movement in that direction. And it's, of course, I don't want to say, I mean, it's of course after considerable trauma and pain that our young people have experienced and continue to experience at the hands of unethical and harmful, you know, police officers. But again, I know there's other work that's being done. I spoke before the California State Assembly recently on police misconduct and what can be done to heal relationships between the Black community and police. And so this idea about, you know, accountability, true accountability, about, you know, police systems and institutions not taking the side of police and harming community in the process, not just implicit bias training, but a kind of restructuring of the automatic internalized racism that so many police officers have, and then inflict upon Black bodies where they don't see our humanity. All of that is something I'm passionate about, our organization's passionate about. And I think it's only through using our voices and taking action to resist that we are empowered and that we actually support our own mental health. Really, you know, that if we are not able to do that, then we feel silenced, and we are silenced. We're more vulnerable and more harmed, I would say, in that process.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Bankhead. Other panelists, do you want to add to that question?
Listen, I think a lot of it has to do with priorities. And so just historically, there seems to have been an approach of trying to control largely people of color in urban environments, schools being one of them, versus reimagining what these youngsters are experiencing and the traumas they encountered on their pathway to adolescence. And instead of trying to control them and erect walls around them, you have to think about helping them. And I think police were often given the benefit of the doubt that, the police are the good guys, and they're here to maintain law and order and make sure everyone's following the rules. And there's always this tendency to idealize them, when in fact, I think, the story of whether it be Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and the advent of smartphones, we see some of the underbelly of policing, and it's more common than many folks ever imagined. So I think the silver lining is that we're at an inflection point where we can begin to have these conversations about how do we help young people in a school setting instead of locking them up or setting up interactions with the juvenile justice system. And let's try to help these young people, and particularly those who come from just very intense and traumatic environments. So I think the country is, we're quickly developing a readiness for these types of interventions. And this conversation is an important step.
Great, thank you. Talia, do you have anything to add?
Yes, and thank you, piggybacking off of both of our doctors. The way I kind of put that in perspective, I did work for a few years at Life Learning Academy on Treasure Island. They're the sister to the Delancey Street in San Francisco. And so at that school, the youth that came through there are what what society was calling the throwaways, the ones who, were fighting cases, they got gun charges, drug charges, all of these things failing behind school. We would take them in. At that school, we had therapists, counselors, parent presence, not police. And so it became more of a coordination of care system where, again, this village of raising a child, we came together to do that. And, we interacted with law enforcement when we needed to, but as far as being in the schools, what I've seen be successful and speaking to the Life Learning Academy and Delancey Street models, Life Learning Academy has a 98% graduation rate, having counselors, therapists, parents in the school, to keep things in check. And if something is coming up, hey, you got a team of people who are culturally competent, mind you, working with these young people. And so, we did not have any police presence, and the school is still there, and it's been a successful model. So I just wanted to add that piece.
I have to say something about, so, I know I guess we all have different experiences. I was socialized not to trust the police. I grew up in South Central Los Angeles. My grandfather was a white man who used to get arrested by his brother, who was the sheriff of the town, for being with a Black woman. I think a lot of Black folks have these kind of histories, these experiences where we don't really trust the police. We understand the history of policing in the United States, which came out of, the overseer and industrial complex came out of a desire and a need to control Black bodies. And so we here sitting in the home of the Black Panther Party, we've never been particularly, complacent or, kind of trusting in these institutions that oppress us. And so I guess the other thing I want to say is that there's nothing wrong with our children as they are. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with them at all. And there's a way that our systems and school systems are policing them from their infancy and criminalizing them and kind of seeing them as the problem. And so they sometimes then come to see themselves as the problem. I'm thinking of a young man who used to work for us who was first suspended when he was 5 years old from kindergarten while trying to take the candy that was in his lunchbox. And so he broke into the teacher's, locked office space, and the schools call the police as opposed to engage in a restorative process or a process of just, you know, being appropriate with a 5-year-old. So that person who came to work with us was suspended 111 times. So we have those kind of experiences with transitional age youth who have been smart people, you know what I mean? Like I know and travel with this person and trained with this person and just know him to be a brilliant star. And yet the systems that he was schooled in for his entire K through 12 education was really stacked against him. And I would say because he was a Black man and he was feared, and that was he was experienced as a threat. This was a baby, you know, and actually all the life I've known him, he was a baby. Even when he was in his 20s, a baby to me, you know what I mean? Because that's how I see our men. I'm not afraid of them. I love them. And I don't just want to hug them. I do hug them, you know, because I feel like that is my calling. That's my responsibility.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm still going to stay with the questions and answers because they're really rich questions, and then I'll get back to our scripted questions. So here's another one from Jeremiah. How might you suggest we help people recognize when their adaptive behaviors, while healthy strategies, are masking unhealthy environments? For example, a young person in my advisory space did not realize that some of the behaviors she was experiencing were racially bigoted, until the group pointed out to her experience was unique to her and not consistent with respectful behavior. So that's a thought from Jeremiah. Next question. As adults, we are challenged with talking about, sorry, people are putting in a lot of questions here. It's like he's bouncing around. Okay, here we go. As adults, we are challenged with talking about our own mental health wellness issues. How can we recognize signs in young people and get them to open up and talk about what they are experiencing? Who would like to take that first?
Sure.
I love it.
Don't worry, I'll be brief. But number one, folks have to have confidence in their powers of observation. And sometimes you'll notice a young person who's struggling. Maybe they're acting out, maybe they're sullen, and they're not talking so much, but you observe a change, right? And perhaps when you see that, you're busy. That would be the moment to stop and describe what you observe. Just, hey, you know, you look different. Where's the smile? Where's the energy? And let's say they kind of rebuff you or reject the invitation to talk. You've planted a seed, and that's critically important. You've extended an invitation. Say, hey, even if you're not up to it right now, whenever you're ready, I'm here for you. We share this community. I'm available for you. That's why I'm here. And, you know, I just want to have this. I want you to talk to me. So take the time to talk to the young person, and don't talk yourself out of what you've observed. I know this kid, and this is a change. They could actually be suffering, and you could really be that key to getting them to help. So that's confidence in your powers of observation and your curiosity, and then just invite them to have a conversation. If they're not available in that moment, you've planted the seed for them to have that discussion in the future. That concept applies to when I'm having conversations with folks about medication, planting the seed. When I'm having conversations with folks about the vaccine, planting the seed. So no one wants to be put upon and bullied, but folks want to be invited to the conversation.
Great, thank you very much. Dr. Bankhead?
Yeah, I think that's true. You know, I think that young people need a context where it's, you know, created for them to be vulnerable, to share, to express themselves. So we do that with restorative justice circles, but it's modeling that as well. So they have the invitation, but not an obligation to speak and to tell their truth. And they can sit in this circle with others and see people, a multi-generational space, right, of elders and young people from all different walks of life. It's not just, you know, folks who are, we have people who are homeless, we have people who are professionals, all in the circle together, right? And everyone who's there is expected or invited to share their truth. So it's not this hierarchical kind of relationship where only the professionals are listening and other, you know, folks who are struggling are talking. The belief that we have is that everybody has something that they're working on, something to share, something to learn. And so that actually encourages more vulnerability and more willingness to examine things in a safe environment that feels sacred. And so what's wonderful that we find after creating these environments is that, you know, young people, transitional age youth will come to us like mad, like, I need a circle, you know, like, okay, I love that. Come on, let's give it to you. If that's what you need, you know, we all need one, right? And my staff even, who some of them are formerly incarcerated, some are, you know, very young and some very old, you know, they have all sorts of stuff. But our staff too will say, I need a circle, right? I'm working on this thing and I need a community of support to wrap itself around me. And I need to feel safe and I need to be able to be vulnerable. And I need you to do that with me, right? Not just the identified patients, right? Not just the folks who seem to be having challenges, but everybody up in here, right? If you're gonna be here, you're gonna be a part of it. And if not, you need to get out the door. Like that's how we deal with that. Like if you can't contribute, if you can't be here and be authentic, then, you know, step away and be here when you can. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Talia, do you have anything to add?
Yes, in kind of piggybacking off and just referring to like the signs, our staff at HHREC, when we're working with Tay, you know, the first steps is to establish some type of trust and a bond, because we're talking about Tay opening up, being vulnerable, being able to share what's going on, or are they in a safe environment? You know, do they feel safe with you? And so one of the things that has been successful, in particular with our Downtown Tay program, is that our staff have lived experience. And so some of those signs, when our young people walk through the door, they can recognize them because they're survivors themselves, or they've either experienced it or come close in some capacity. And so to me, that's very important, because even when I'm interacting with a young person, if, you know, they're talking about, hey, they're going through, you know, they got a court date coming up, or, you know, if they're a young parent and they're missing some resources, you know, we're able to identify because we share similar experiences, or I have gone through or survived enough to kind of recognize some of these signs, even with them not necessarily going into a whole bunch of detail and speaking, but we want to, our goal is always to build the bond and the trust, because one thing that our young people steadily tell us is, hey, so many folks in their lives have disappointed them. You know, whether it started with a parent, or, you know, teachers, or the criminal justice system, you know, they're getting failed left and right. And so the first thing that they're looking for when they come through the door is, okay, what is, you know, your staff, you guys are talking to me, but can I trust you? You know, can we build some bond? Can we establish some type of respect so that I can't even open up to begin to listen to you, right? And so I think that in order to really be able to kind of see those signs, recognize those signs, you definitely have to bond with a young person. You can't be afraid to open up to talk to them. And even when I'm, you know, if I'm not even in the facility, if I'm out and about and I see young people, I'm not afraid to speak. You know, I'll speak to them, say, how are you doing? A lot of times they just You know, they're looking for someone to listen a lot of times, and the key is non-judgmental too. Not coming at them, well, oh, yeah, that sounds, oh, you got another case, huh? You know, no, well, what you doing about this time? Do you want to go back to jail or not? You know, what resources do you think you might need? You know, coming from that angle. And so I would say bonding, establishing that trust, and just to piggyback off of what both of our doctors are saying is, you know, to be willing to listen and advocate.
Great, thank you. And with that, I'm going to keep up with these great questions in the Q&A. Would anyone be willing to speak on generational trauma and how this manifests in the mental health well-being of the family as a whole? Who would like to take it first?
Well, listen, trauma is ubiquitous, okay? And especially if you look at some of our communities, they may be more densely populated. You may have several generations living in a single dwelling, or you may have multiple members of an extended family living in the same neighborhood and experiencing the social determinants of health and mental health, whether it be not enough safe open space to play. You may live in you know, a food desert, maybe just under-resourced environments, and everything that comes with that. So whether it be violence in the community, or if you have folks who are not living for, folks aren't living for a long time because of the intensity of the environment and the impact that has on health, and how it could really give communities a sense of a foreshortened future. But what people have to realize is these environments could inspire resilience, because we all have to survive. And so we all have human yearnings to kind of help our young advance and make it further than we did. But you cannot discount or underestimate the impact of trauma and how it could even affect you on a cellular level and interfere with your ability to age peacefully in a very healthy way. And finally, the impact that trauma could have on one's ability to problem solve. And sometimes folks could problem solve in ways that are not tremendously helpful. Perhaps seeking an escape from the trauma, whether it be through substances, or folks could really kind of reenact what they experienced when they were young, and whether it be physical discipline and setting limits with the young, or the way you interact with loved ones and relations, maybe as it applies to intimate partner violence. So the impact of trauma on human behavior certainly cannot be discounted. And finally, I want to acknowledge what Ms. Benet said, the importance of establishing credibility and trust between the service providers and those that we serve. Just to give a quick anecdote, I remember I was interviewing a young man, and you know, I knew he was hustling, you know, that he was in the drug game. And so I'm taking the legal history, and I was fortunate enough to have established rapport with him. And so he may have disclosed a little more than he wanted to, but I had to remind him, I said, I don't work for the police, and I'm not an agent of the police. That's not why I'm here. And I don't even need to document all this. And that caught him by surprise. But we have to, you know, I work for you to help you, and I'm not here to report you. That's not my function here. So that credibility is critically important.
Mm-hmm. I want to respond to that too. There are two things I'm trying to keep it brief, but it's not coming out as brief in my mind. So I'm trying to work on that. So one is a little story, which I will tell. And then the other is just in terms of intergenerational trauma, I'm thinking about adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, right, which has gotten a lot of attention. And I'm thinking about the epigenetics of trauma. So the ways in which, as Dr. Salaam was saying, that if we're exposed to trauma, it is impacting us on a cellular level. And Black folks have had, hundreds of years of this kind of exposure. And so it is impacting us. And also our children are, they say basic personality may be developed in the first 5 to 8 years of life. So what children, infants, babies are exposed to is impacting them. They are feeling it in their bodies. They're seeing it with their eyes. They're processing it with their minds. It's impacting their heart. And it's shaping the character, the personality that they become. And so, yes, it impacts us. I guess I'll just say that in all those different ways. And I'll leave it at that because of time. But what I do want to tell this other story about how kind of intergenerational trauma in really practical ways shows up for us at Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth. So, and somewhat related to what Dr. Salaam was saying about, what we need to, that we are not agents of the police. And we actually think of the police as not necessarily the arm of justice, but of just the agent of a criminal, of regard, or gatekeepers of the criminal legal system. And so we have people who come to us sometimes when there has been some kind of trauma, sometimes more than trauma, some kind of criminal activity, and they don't want to, for example, press charges, but they want accountability. They know that this healing needs to happen, but they're concerned about, for example, if they are accusing somebody who's in their home. So I'm thinking of a specific example of someone coming to us. These are adults who and their family had a history of incest and rape and sexual violence in their family across multiple generations. And people knew about it and people tried to do things about it, but they thought it was something that had stopped some generations before or with the elders. They didn't think that it was happening with the children, right? And so these children then became adults, and one of the brothers who was the person causing the harm was incarcerated. And so when he came home from being incarcerated, now everyone's an adult, it's been years and years later, and yet a sister who had been violated sexually wanted some accountability, but didn't want to go to the police about her brother who had harmed her because she didn't want him to have to go back to jail. And yet this was intergenerational trauma, right? This is really practical intergenerational trauma and a desire for healing, but not a desire to engage the criminal legal system that would pathologize this, family member even more. And so those folks came to us and said, can you help with this? We're grown-ups and we will deny this if you bring it up, kind of anywhere, whatever, but just know this, we want a circle. We want some accountability. We want to speak these things, and we want the family member to be held accountable in a way that feels fair and right and just, that we can have consensus about it. We're all grown people now. We've gone through this trauma and there's a desire for healing. So I guess what I'll say is that there are, for families and for people who want to lean into healing and want true and deep accountability, but they also don't want to be further pathologized and oppressed by this system that disproportionately harms Black and Brown people. They often don't have a place to process that, right? They don't have a place to take it. And for providers who even want to help, it's a very slippery slope and a difficult, place to navigate, to be able to provide that support, but also, do so legally in a way that is responsible to all parties. I'll say that.
Great, thank you. And looking at the time, basically what we're going to do, and I want to acknowledge everybody for the great questions that they presented. Sorry we couldn't get to all of them, whether they were in the question and answer or in the chat, but they'll definitely know that we're acknowledging them. So with our final wrap up, we're just briefly going to go through and have each of you talk about the resources or how to support our young Black Tay youth? That's been a very common theme through all the questions that I'm looking at. And then any final words you have to share, and we'll start with Talia.
Thank you, and it's Talia. Thank you.
Talia, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just resources. First of all, we have the beautiful thing about Oakland in particular, the Bay Area, but Oakland in particular, we have all of these wonderful, we're very blessed here to have all of these wonderful nonprofits and CBOs, and all of them, you know, some of us do similar things, but some of us have our own lanes. And so, you know, we have a beautiful system here where we can refer our young people. So I know that one place that lists some of our sister CBOs and nonprofits, you know, you can go on to the Alameda County Behavioral Health website, and you can go also, one of my favorites is the Alameda County Mental Health Services Act website. And HHREC is here. We have our Downtown Tay program. Like I said, we've been servicing our community since 1984. And we are here to make sure that we connect our young people to resources. So you can go onto our website. We have resources there for events, different support groups. You know, if you're a young parent and you need some things, resources, we have that for our young parents. And make sure that you stay connected to a lot of our medical providers too, you know, whether it's your Kaiser system for your mental health, or, you know, your doctors and therapists, you know, so that you can have the connections to be able to, you know, go into therapy if you feel you need therapy or need access to therapy. We, Alameda County in general, when it comes to our Tay, we have a lot of programs. We have a lot of resources. You just have to go on. That's what Google's there for. Google it, we're there, and we welcome you with open arms.
Great, thank you. Dr. Bankhead, final words?
Just agree with what Ms. Bennett has said in terms of the resources available in our community. We have many of them. This is the therapy capital of the world. We have more therapists here per capita than anywhere else on the planet. And I think there's an openness at all levels of society. At least the folks I work with in East Oakland and in Piedmont are all like, yeah, go to therapy. You know, everyone will say that, but the reality of actually doing that is something different. So I would just encourage folks to get in the right kind of therapeutic environment that works for you wherever you are, and to take the time and explore and talk to others about it. Like, it doesn't have to be this thing that's done only in silence as you're trying to navigate the kind of mental health services network. And of course, you can always come to us at Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth. We're at RJOY.org. And you, as a Black person, you can pop into any of our 10 Restorative Justice African American Healing Circles any week. And we'd love to have you. You can just be there and listen and talk and observe and, you know, kind of think through your own process about what you need.
Great, thank you. Dr. Salaam, final words?
Yes. I belong to an organization called Global Health Psychiatry, 10 Black psychiatrists from all over the country. We want to attack stigma and increase mental health awareness through education and community action. We publish books for the Black community focused on mental health. Our first book is Mind Matters, a resource guide to psychiatry for Black communities. The avatar for this book was a Black grandmother. We don't hide behind medical jargon. We want to cut out the middleman, and we want the people to be educated about mental health. Our second book is How Amari Learned to Love School Again, a story about ADHD, beautifully illustrated. We used a brother from Chicago named Tyrus Gaucher. He brought our vision to life through the children's book. Embedded in the book is a parent guide written in question and answer format, just like Mind Matters. And our most recent book, the third book in 3 years, is Bree's Journey to Joy, a story about childhood grief and depression. We write literature where you can see you. That's what we do. We own it, we control it. There's no one in the C-suite telling us what to write. We pooled our education, talents, and resources to establish this company to elevate, educate, and uplift the community. The books are available on Amazon, Global Health Psychiatry. And finally, the most powerful aspect of this effort is this photograph of the 10 Black psychiatrists who own the company. And we encountered the same challenge throughout the land. Our folks are coming to care late. And we said, if we get in early, we educate, we can intervene early, and that will yield a better outcome. And that is our passion. We feel there are no better ambassadors for Black mental health than us. Of course, there are others in this space, absolutely. But that, you know, I think that would be a great start, because we're not writing for other professionals, we're writing for the people.
Great. Thank you so much to all of the panelists. Great, great, great presentation. Thank you to the audience for all of your great questions. We really appreciate that. Sorry we couldn't get to all of them. And with that, I'll turn it over to Supervisor Carson.
Wow. Well, everybody was talking to me. Let me tell you, I know this was supposed to be targeted towards young people and our younger generation. But as one of the referenced in the presentation, OGs here, you were talking directly to me. And what I feel so good about is that we have people who look like us that have had shared experiences, being able to talk about how we as Black people should not fear getting support and talking about our stresses and our concerns and our emotional, that we don't have to bottle it up and hold it in and then all of a sudden have it explode in ways that we can't control. And so I just want to say a big, big thank you to our panelists today and our moderator today. And we almost had 100 people all the way through tonight's panel. And let me say that we hope that you will take this information, share it with others who weren't able to log in today to today's discussion. We will make sure that you will be able to refer other people to today's episode or today's Zoom meeting regarding mental health, and particularly focused on our young people. Even after the series is over, we're going to make sure that that happens. But more importantly, we have people who look like us, that have our experiences, that can assist us in trying to navigate our way through all of the emotionalism and the trauma and the mental challenges that we have, and all of the interactions that we find that are stressful, because life these days have increased in terms of being stressful. Living in a pandemic, in a bubble environment, and on some level has elevated that. And so there are ways in which we can find our way to peacefully navigate through that. And no, we're not alone. We're all experiencing these things, regardless as to our age or our economic situation or our educational background. We're all experiencing the same thing. So again, I want to say thank you. I know we have 2 more series to go. Shahida, I'm going to turn it back over to you. You're my boss, and I want to say thank you for everything that you've done.
I want to say thank everyone for coming to this.
And you can have the final word tonight. Thank you for everybody who's tuned in today. Share that. Share this with everybody, please.
Tomorrow is going to, next week, sorry, not tomorrow, it's going to talk to parents with children. Dr. Salaam will be back to talk to us about adolescents and children. And so next Thursday at 5, please come back. We're excited. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for listening. And thank our panelists for having a great, great discussion. And thank you, Supervisor Carson, for allowing me to do this.
Allowing you, you're the boss. Thank you, boss.
Thank
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks to everybody.
Thank you so much.